Hi, my name is Brooks, and I'd like to welcome you to Breakthrough Chinese. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the differences between Chinese and Western languages, so you can understand what we mean when we say that Chinese needs to be learned using a fundamentally different approach than what we typically use when studying Western languages such as Spanish, French, or Italian. But before we talk about Chinese, I'd like to take a few minutes to discuss English compared to adjacent languages, because the overlap between English and many Western languages is significant enough that it impacts our learning style. So when we consider English compared to French or Spanish, we see that the overlap in terms of the alphabet, phonetics, and grammar is actually quite substantial. So much so that we can study these languages in a somewhat organic way, or what I like to call a topic-centric model, where each chapter in a course or textbook consists of a dialogue or article, some new vocabulary, and a grammar bit. We know enough about the foundational concepts of adjacent languages in terms of phonetics and grammar that the incremental knowledge is actually relatively small. But when we compare English and Chinese, the opposite is true. The divergence between these two languages is so great that we have to rethink how we approach learning Chinese if we want to achieve results in a reasonable time frame. Chinese is considered a topic prominent or OSV model, which means that the sentence structure can be quite different than in English, which typically uses an SVO model. The rich and beautiful character set of Chinese is a highly visual language. And as we'll discuss in a separate video, this visual aspect is a huge difference in terms of how we process language, or at least in terms of how we develop the ability to recognize character and word patterns. English uses a single alphabet, and there's no phonetic guide needed. Even if you don't know the meaning of a written word, you can still pronounce it. But as a character-based language, Chinese has no phonemic orthography, which is just a fancy way of saying that you can't tell how to pronounce a character just by looking at the strokes. So to compensate for this, we need a phonetic guide in Chinese. And except for Aussies who've had too much beer, there's only one dialect for spoken English. Chinese, on the other hand, has 7 or 8 spoken dialects, each of which is considered a unique language in its own right. So much so that before modern Mandarin was created in the 1950s, Chinese from different regions of the mainland had difficulties communicating with each other. And we don't think about homophones that much in English, but in spoken Chinese, homophones are the rule, not the exception. And for this reason, precise pronunciation is a critical skill to mastering Chinese. Based on these differences, we're going to introduce some concepts that are a departure from traditional learning methods. We'll discuss these in depth in another video, but for now, let's just recap what we've learned today. Because of the issues with characters and homophones, Chinese cannot be learned phonetically. Having said that, pronunciation is far more important in Chinese than it is in English. And unlike English, Chinese is learned at the character or syllable level. Visual pattern recognition skills are the key to learning characters. And finally, learning characters in sets or networks is a far more effective approach than learning vocabulary used in topic-centric dialogues. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join us again. 再见.